Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the KLNS Rugby Podcast because tonight we turn our attention across the codes to preview the Women's Six Nations as Ireland bid to kick on from an historic 2024. England aim for yet another Grand Slam, and it's a championship being built in the backdrop of the biggest World Cup in women's rugby history. Join me tonight to preview this exciting tournament. We have podcast regular now of the Mother Rucker podcast in Ailbhe, and we have debutante of rap fame, Julia. Ladies, it's great to have you on. It's always great when we have experienced podcasters amongst us, and I don't get royalties for having rap family people on, but Lee is always happy when we spread the load around. I'll start with yourself, Julia, because I like to get the outside of Ireland guests to answer first. Unfortunately for yourself, where's your excitement levels at as we head into Six Nations 2025?
I am really excited. I mean, it's hard not to be excited in World Cup year. As all of the media being reduced or being produced has been saying, it's doing the job that it needs to do to really ramp it up. I think the teams that were maybe on a downslope are perhaps on an upslope, and the regular high performers are going to high perform. It should be a really great competition. I'm excited.
Oh, absolutely, and it's got so much. Just it has so much about it anyway. The best times of Six Nations. I know you could look at it and say England have dominated, but even the fact that it looked like Wales were ready to jump on and be the third best team in the competition. Then Scotland took that mantle. Then Ireland last year with a last minute win in Kingspan Stadium in Ravenhill. And we will start with Ireland as we always do with all these shows. And Alva, I'll just start with yourself. It's a big year. We've mentioned already, but where do you think Ireland are at as we head into 2025?
I think we're quite an interesting place at the moment. I think we had a very good 2024, particularly the Six Nations, coming third, really unexpected, qualifying for the WXV1 and then into that competition and just blowing it out of the water and coming in second. I think we had an astonishing 2024. Whether we can keep that up in 2025 or not is yet to be seen. And I think, as a huge fan of the team, I kind of wonder, oh, can we've set our standard very high, but why can't we? I think we have an incredible squad. The team's announced today. That is a strong, strong team. Why can't we? I think France, their form, the last five games, they won one. Their form has massively dipped in the latter half of 2024. I know it's France. I know France do French things and just come out of the blocks, play a very different style of rugby. That can switch it up three times in the space of one game, reacting to what's in front of them. But I think we have something there. We have the creative players, and we have a group of players with their heads up. So I think going into this competition, I think we could be forgiven for being a little bit confident. Irish people aren't, don't do well with being overly confident. We like to be a little bit of the underdog. We're comfortable in that kind of position. So, I think we're looking at third or fourth. As usual, first and second are wrapped up. They're a done deal. They don't even need to play a game of rugby. We know what's going to happen with them. But the rest of us, the four other teams, there's real competition there. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of form change. But I think it's going to be great, and I think we've potential to do very well.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of mentioned the Ireland selection. We'll get on to that in 2 seconds. But as you said, there's a sense that injuries are starting to clear up. Maybe not necessarily in week one, but towards the tournament is the hope, because we are at kind of the end of the Celtic Challenge, the PWR season. It's arguably a stronger squad than what we see in the autumn because of that. But from your vantage point, would you mind just taking me through, for those who may not know, who we should look out for with an eye on kind of today's selection, but even just going down the line? And I'd just like to hold my hand up, podcast disclaimer, just because I'm Van Slow Man doesn't mean I've asked Alva to just focus on the Van Slow girls or anything like that. So we won't go down that direction. Just take whatever way you want.
Well, the very obvious one to watch out for, the two really, would be our back row duo of Erin King and Aoife Wafer, who, again, last year, particularly Erin King in the latter half of last year, she played 15s for years. She hadn't played a lot or sorry, sevens rugby for years. She hasn't played a lot of 15s. I think the last time she played 15 was probably before any of her seven stuff. She's been on the seven circuit for years, doing particularly well, but came into the 15s game and just lit it up. You know, she gets, she gets a lot of ball. She's lively. She loves to carry. Her defensive game is exceptional. Her ability to find space is exceptional. And still a very, very young player, as is Aoife Wafer. Aoife Wafer is a battering ram of a human being. Give her the ball, and God love anybody who tries to tackle her. Looking at the Black Ferns game last year, she carried 3 of the Black Ferns over the line with her from 5 meters out. She did similar. I think she carried 4 Wales players over the line last year in the Six Nations. How does one human being do that? I do not know. And I don't want to find out because I don't want to be on the receiving end of any of that. Those are 2 incredible players. They'd probably be the more obvious ones. We're hearing a lot of talk about those, but I'm quite excited to see a bit more of the likes of Stacey Flood. We've seen her at 10. We've seen a little bit of her at 15 lately. Again, sevens has really been where she's played her trade. But I think as a 15, she's really coming into her own. She's a great player, well able to field the ball in space. That's the sevens player in her. Wonderful boot and a wonderful ability to, I think, work across a back 3 quite well and cover space. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing her as well. I'm looking forward to seeing Ruth Campbell in the second row as well.
I was just about to ask if I could jump in because I'm really excited for Ruth Campbell. I know second rows don't get flowers very often, but she's such an intriguing player to watch. Sorry, go on.
No. I completely agree with you. And even looking at some of the content that the IRView have been putting out, anytime you see her, she looks like she's in her element. That woman walks around.
I think she loves rugby. I think she loves being there. And you love to see it, especially, we've talked about the journey that Ireland has been on the women's side. And I'm really glad that the two, Aoife Wafer, that Ruth get to come into this.
Absolutely. I think Ruth Campbell, I think we're only seeing, the bud. She hasn't even flowered yet. She hasn't bloomed. She's
also
going to
incredibly
be
young.
Incredibly young. Again, we do have a very young side. I've spoken about in the past the amount of average caps we've had across the squad. 2 years ago, the Irish team, the average caps across the entire squad was just over 6 caps per player.
Yeah, I thought it was 6 to 7.
Which is tiny. We're still, in tiny numbers, but we're over double that now. We're at 13 caps per player. So we're still a very, very young side, but we do have the balance of experience and that youth. And I think, the likes of Ruth Campbell is in there. She's a young player, but she's got a very solid head on her shoulders. We saw her perform quite well at the Interpros last year. And it was
I think a lot of credit can be given to the Celtic Challenge as well, especially if you're an Ireland fan. I think of the 3 Celtic nations, Ireland by far took the most away from that competition, and it is how we ended up finding talents like Ruth.
Absolutely, and she very much is a talent, and I think we're going to see a lot out of her. And I'm hoping she's going to have a very good competition. A little bit disappointing that she's getting her spot there when Sam Monaghan isn't there, just still out injured. Really feel for Sam Monaghan, but it is an opportunity for the likes of Ruth Campbell.
Absolutely, and like that juxtaposition of caps is really important because Ruth Campbell and Erin King were both standout. Like I thought Ruth Campbell had more than 2 caps last year. She impressed in both of them. I thought she'd played 2 or 3 of 3 or 4 of those back end of the season games is what I'm trying to say. Erin King was just phenomenal. Looked like a test veteran from minute 1. But you look at that bench. Cliona Maloney has 38 caps, second highest cap player in the squad. Christy Haney is 19. Grace Moore has 17. Adele McMahon needs no introduction. She is 30. Aoibhinn Riley is 12. Andy Breen is 25. Only Fiona Toit and Siobhan McCarthy have 10 or less caps in that bench. So now instead of bringing off the bench a very inexperienced bunch, you're bringing on a lot more experience. And obviously, the Cliona Maloney recall last year, there wasn't one person, well, there'd probably been one person who wasn't too happy with it. With the vast majority, we're very happy to see her back in there. and the complexion has changed. Like Niamh Jones is now up to 30 caps, for instance. Dorothy Wall is 32 and is starring over at Exeter and so on and so forth. And it has to be said as well, we have a new captain. We have Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe. Sorry, I knew that was going to happen. Amy Lee Costigan is captaining Ireland for the first time. Again, only 13 caps, but a natural finisher and someone that everyone will be keeping an eye on. Probably someone Ireland could have done with when she wasn't there at times, but a very good selection. And Julia, I might just get your take on it because, as we said, Ireland had a great 2024. That win over the Black Ferns, I'm sure we'll mention 3 or 4 times per episode over the next 6 weeks. That's the aim anyway. And there's a new lease of life, as you said yourself. It really feels like Ireland, I don't know, the shackles are off kind of thing, and that the talent is finally being allowed to be showed in this squad.
Absolutely. And I don't really think that it behooves anybody to dance around why Ireland is in the situation that they are in now. I hope that it's okay if we just say it out loud, but there were people who needed to leave who were dark clouds over this team. The players said it themselves. It's not us kind of guessing. It did feel at some time that sometimes that news of her leaving made everybody happier. Whether or not it's about him, it's about the way that he works in the chemistry of the union. I don't know. But it really does feel like everybody is a little bit happier. And when you feel that way, you start performing that way. And I think that that has a lot of contribution to what happened with the Black Ferns, which was fantastic. And that year had a lot of upsets, which is what we love. And I think as we go down the expectations for each team throughout the Six Nations, we're going to talk more about the fact that like now more than ever, upsets are possible. And I think that that environment, that the possibility is really in Ireland's favor because Ireland is one of those teams that knows how to capitalize on it. All you need is the right leadership. I'm really glad you brought up Amy Lee Costigan. I actually wanted to ask you guys because on our end, as Wales fans, and then also just as neutrals, it seems a little bit odd that that was who was given the armband instead, considering that perhaps she hasn't played with a lot of these 15s players. It's true that she was in Celtic Challenge, which is great. But at the same time, I'm looking at the caps right now and it's 13 caps for 15s. And you did mention that Tricky is Adele McMahon is on the bench. I'm curious your honest opinion if you feel like there's a risk of perhaps losing some of that institutional knowledge that Adele McMahon has, her leadership gravitas. Because as far as I understood as an outsider, she was well liked. I don't know if maybe there's a problem with coaches, if maybe she's coming back from an injury and they don't want to publicize it. But I'm actually kind of sorry to throw it back, but I'm a little bit curious how you guys feel about leadership in Ireland.
My understanding about Tricky is that she's carrying a slight knock coming into this
That
match.
makes sense then.
I think that's one element of it. I think another element is that we do want to stack up that back row against a big French pack, and she's probably not our most explosive back row, and I think that's why she's not there. I think though the Amy Lee Costigan decision, I think it came as a surprise to me as well. But when I look at the makeup of the rest of the team, you see Niamh Jones is vice captain. That makes absolute sense to me.
I would have pegged her as the captain if
Yeah,
not
and I
Tricky.
think she's close enough. Like she's 30 caps. I was only looking at some stats from her the other day. She has 50 points in those 30 caps. For a hooker, that is immense. That is absolutely immense.
They also put out she won the new PWR award, the most nuisance forward. She is the most nuisance forward at a breakdown. She had the most breakdown incurrences.
She's a smiling assassin for a reason.
She's a smiling assassin for a reason. I
amazing.
mean, it's true, but she provides so many so many things that you don't expect your hooker to come with. She has them. I mean, she really could also, I would consider her like a fourth back row, but
absolutely, I agree.
I was quite surprised that she was vice. So
yeah,
I'm glad I'm clarified.
But I think there's also a question about who are the other leaders in the Irish squad. A lot of them are on the bench. Tina Maloney would be a natural leader. She's not our starting hooker, and I don't think she should be our starting hooker. Niamh Jones is just too good right now. I think, another option, Sam Monaghan was obviously injured. Another option, Enya Breen, she's on the bench and she has captained Ireland. She is a natural leader, very vocal, very good at interacting with the refs. She's carrying a slight injury. She is on the bench. She isn't ruled out entirely. She's not fit enough to play the full match. So I think
That's
we
great to
have,
know. I wondered why, because she is another one that I'm
yeah,
just like,
she's carrying a hand
that for me
injury.
is always on the sheet. Okay.
Yeah, and particularly against the French, she's
That's
a
what I was
heavy
thinking.
carrier. She's going to run into
Exactly.
walls.
Big
So
carrier for a center. Exactly.
exactly, but I think there are a number of questions around leaders there, but most of our really kind of natural leaders are on the bench. So I think the decision makes sense. I don't
Yeah.
think it's
It was
any issue
utilitarian.
with the exactly. I don't think it's any issue between players and management or anything like that. From what I hear within the camp, the cohesion there, the self-belief. They talk about
It's
this
such a great,
green wave, and
so
they're
great.
all rowing in behind it. The culture is really where it should be. So I don't think there's any issue with that. And I can imagine the full squad will be absolutely behind Amy Lee and just, delighted for her.
And that buzz has been there for over a year now. Like it was kind of
Yes.
came in
Over a
under the
solid
radar
year.
last year because obviously WXV3 is so off Broadway when they were competing in that back in 2023. They came in last year, the comments were, we're in a really good place. And I think everyone looked at it as like, look, we'll see how it goes. There was no expectations, there was no pressure on this team. And they delivered in a big way, should have beaten Italy. Um, did turn over Wales and Scotland, which is kind of what you're hoping for this year, of course. And like the fact they turned over Scotland after the defeat in Twickenham as well said so much. I think you look at, as you said, like the leadership point is great, but I actually like Niamh Jones as vice captain insofar as if you made her captain, you are probably putting pressure on yourself not to bring on Clean Maloney as early. Whereas now, because you have that, you essentially have two vice captains in the same position. I think it's fair to say because you have that 50
Yeah.
30 minutes split, lot of experience, and she's got a lot of tries from the base of them all. There's a reason for that, because Alex Codling's work has been absolutely superb over the last 18 months, and he's come back in. He's departed Munster. He's gone back to Ireland, which is absolutely the right move. Years gone by, that wouldn't have happened. He'd have stayed at Munster and maybe gone back for the World Cup. It's good to see that was the move being made. We'll just wrap it up on Ireland because we have 5 other teams to get into.
The other teams.
There's other teams.
There are other teams apparently, including
At least 5.
At least 5, including one Ireland have to face. But Ailbhe, like just straight up, what is a successful Six Nations for Ireland this year? Because look, you could look at it and do what we all do, like, well, it's a World Cup year, so the World Cup is all that matters. But at the same time, Six Nations matters too.
I think success is third again. Success has to be third again. I think second is beyond our reach. Maybe not. That there is potential that there could be an upset on the cards against France, but it would take Ireland on their very best day and France really off the boil in order for that to happen. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Like beating England would be. That's just I don't think that's even on anybody's radar. It's not going to be a focus. I think coming out of the England game, you're just talking about as little damage as possible in terms of injuries and in terms of their confidence. But I think beating Wales, beating Scotland, beating Italy, those are the things that we have to do. It particularly to keep that wave of momentum going from 2024 and into that World Cup. We really need to keep that. I think if we do come fourth, for example, though, it will fill us with a bit of hunger and a bit of anger. I think the Ireland side that we have are, though there is crossover in terms of a lot of players from 3 years ago or so, there's a different mentality there. They're not a side that gives up easily. They're not a side that drops the head, which we would have seen, 3 years ago that, the head dropped. As soon as the first try was conceded, the head was gone. They don't do that. They don't even know how to do it anymore. There's so much self-belief there that I don't think they're capable of it. So I think, if we were to come forth, that would buoy us, but I think we do need that third to really kind of cement our place, as in we're back and we're competitive.
And I think the WXV And I'd include the Australia game in Ravenhill as being a part of the WXA, even though it wasn't. It was a warm up. I think that's a great proof of your point because in all of those games, Ireland kind of went through a passage where maybe 10 minutes and things weren't going well. Australia scored one like 50-meter try. Obviously New Zealand, you just couldn't put them away because they're the Black Ferns, they don't go away. But
Mhm.
Ireland's ability, as you said, to just keep the head, keep their composure, and I think it's where you see the evolution of the team. For how good the year was, you've seen them evolve and become a lot more streetwise as the year went on. That French game in particular last year in, I think it was in Lens, I can't remember where exactly, I think it was Lens. You kind of had a situation where Ireland did shoot themselves in the foot a few times. They had opportunities in that game, the Italy game as well. But as the year went on, and as experience grew, and as cohesion grew, and all these things that are important, especially, and like we've spent the last 8 weeks talking about the importance of cohesion in the men's game, but like it's not as big of a factor. Like if we're being honest here, because it's these lads play with each other, they're training with each other 6 months out of the 12 months of the year. It's very different in the women's game. So as
Very.
Ireland's season went on, you've seen it come into fruition. I think that's where Celtic Challenge, yes, it's not the biggest, it's not the toughest competition, but it will
It
stand
doesn't
to
really
Ireland.
matter. It's what it is. I mean, it's
Hmm.
what you have.
Yeah.
So, and we
And
we have this conversation among Wales fans as well, where yes, okay, you're right, it's not another PWR, but it is what we have,
yeah,
and
and it's growing minutes into
it's
players
growing.
and it's growing combinations. I was going to say competition again, but it's growing combinations and you know it's nurturing talent and it's kind of keeping Ireland. You know it's allowing us to have a superpower. I feel like isn't that you have two teams there. It's very cohesive then when the time they go into camp, and I think that's what we're hoping to see. I do believe maybe this is the optimist in me that maybe if Ireland and France towards the end of the tournament, they might have a better chance. But obviously, as you said, there's a couple of niggles there, couple of injuries. If you had them at the end of the tournament, they could be coming in on a high. It could be a very different situation, but we will see. One team who will be going in on a high because we do have to move off is England.
Yeah.
They don't really lose games, I suppose. It's just the best way of putting it. They're deserved favourites for the championship, for the World Cup. Julie, I'll start with yourself. It's all well and good. They're one of the great rugby teams any of us will ever get to see. But how much pressure must they be under as the calendar rolls over to 2025?
Well, I mean, if you ask them and if you ask their coach, John Mitchell, apparently they do not feel very much pressure. In fact, they feel freer and looser than ever, which, okay. That's what they're going to say. It doesn't really upset me, and I don't think any fans of any other teams involved in Six Nations, probably not even on the World Cup. It's because it's what we're used to hearing from England. And I don't
Mhm.
feel bad or like I'm being mean to them by saying they're a little cocky. They are, absolutely. Also, they haven't lost a Six Nations match in 29 matches. I don't know the math because I'm not a math guy, but that's several Six Nations is. So that said, uh I don't know what kind of pressure they feel that we would expect them to feel because traditionally we would expect them to feel pressure from France. And like Alva said earlier, France is having some wobbles. We're going to get to France later and talk about them more in depth. But I don't think they feel that high a pressure from France. What I do hope is that they realize the truth, which is there are threats from Ireland, there are threats from Scotland. I would love to say with more confidence that there are threats from Wales. I don't know if it's this time around. I think this year will probably be a lot of regrowing our faith in the team and each other. But there are definitely threats from Scotland and there are definitely threats from Ireland. Um, I I really wish I could lie and say like I think they care and that they like feel pressure. I don't think they do yet. I think they're foolish not to. I don't think they're going to be putting down 60 or 70 points on Ireland anymore. I don't think they're going to be putting 60 and 70 points down on Scotland anymore.
I
Um,
hope you're right.
I don't see it. And when you look at, and I'm looking right now, I'm not staring off into space. I'm looking right now at what the lineup that he put out today.
Mm.
And there was a lot of discussion around it among people who follow England way more closely than anybody on this call. It's a weird looking side. It's one that suggests that they are extremely confident. Um, Granted, yes, they are playing Italy. I am one of the few people who apparently one of the few people who do not think that Wales are completely destined for the wooden spoon. I don't think it's guaranteed. But I think Italy is in danger. Um, the side that England put out suggests that as well. That said, if you are an England fan or if you're a neutral, there are a lot of exciting players to watch for England, but that wasn't the question.
Yeah, no, like, and we'll get on to that in a minute. I think for all the fantasy rugby heads out there, there's always a few who just will always stay going. It's not been a good week for the fantasy selections because England
Nope.
have decided to rotate. And
No,
Julia,
it's yeah.
I'll ask you on that one. Like, for those who are unfamiliar with the English team in general or the English team named for the weekend, who should we be looking out for from them?
Absolutely. There's some really easy answers to that question. And if you are a fantasy head, this is going to be a huge help for you. But for the few that do follow Six Nations, but don't necessarily follow PWR, you may not be as familiar with Emma Singh and Mia Venner. Both of them are current champions with Gloucester Hartpury. Emma Singh in particular is frightening. Imagine Ellie Kildunn speed and finishing capability, but also she can kick. And she kicks really well. In fact, not to give away the game, I have Emma Singh in and she's my captain. When she's in, she scores. It's true that she's very young. She's also been in the shadow of Ellie Kildunn, which is difficult, and also to a lesser extent, Jess Breach. But Mia Venner as well. Just a fewer skills, but insane speed. I think one of the top try scorers, not point scorers, but try scorers. In Mia Venner, there's been a lot of fanfare around Lily Ives Campion, who's out of Loughborough. She is usually in the second row. Yep, she's in the second row this time. Yeah. Looks like she has one cap. Just like Ruth Campbell, kind of somebody you don't necessarily hear the name for a lot, but who is always working when they are on the pitch. Always worth some points, always going to be putting in tackles. Otherwise, just reviewing it, it's kind of just a mix of the names you know and love. Skaz is there. Skaz will be there forever. Holly Aitchison is in the centers rather than 10. They're throwing Helen Rowland back at 10. It seems a little bit like it's a rotational exercise for John Mitchell for this one. Fair enough. It's Italy. But that said, if you are playing fantasy or also if you are just an England fan, you're going to be quite happy this week.
It's definitely experimental. I mean,
absolutely.
And like you said, the fantasy rugby, the headache that it's created, and the cheek of them, like, not starting Ellie Kildunn. How dare
I was
they?
To say to put Ellie Kildunn on the bench. Jess Breach isn't even on there. Abby Dow isn't even on there.
I know.
I mean,
that's such as their depth and such as their ability to use the Six Nations. The Six Nations, using that as a warm-up almost.
As a like friendlies.
These are like friendlies to them. There's a few in there that I'm kind of interested to see a little bit more of. There's a few names coming back that we haven't seen a lot of. The Amy Cocaines. I'm excited to see Maud Muir playing, and starting. Like I said, Emily Scarrett. She's always there, always has been. Pretty sure she's about 80 years old at this point, still playing great rugby. Yeah. Who I'm quite interested to see is Zoe Allcroft. She's just become the new captain, but she's also playing out of position. There was a few mumblings at the Six Nations launch that she showed up, and why did she have a 6 on her back? Maybe it's a mistake. No, that's not a mistake. This is a bit of an experiment. They're looking to leave her in the back row, maybe get her into the game a bit earlier, maybe get her moving around the park a little bit more. It's interesting to see. That's a lot of pressure on her as a new captain. I know she has captained before, but this is now her gig, and she's out of position. So I think maybe she'll feel a little bit under pressure. A few of the younger players coming back in will feel under pressure. I think the pressure that England are putting themselves under, though, is a completely different pressure that any other team will ever face. I think they're in a situation.
That's a way better way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I think the mentality that's going to be in the England camp is going to be the mentality that you see, in the men's game when they're all, on the hunt to be a lion, for example.
Yep.
Or exactly. Or there's young lads trying to get on a summer tour. What they're kind of doing is they're trying to put their hand up. There's players playing out of position. Exactly. They're trying to put their hand up. There's going to be players going out there trying to absolutely empty themselves on the pitch so that they could potentially go to that World Cup. I know they're not going anywhere, but they're not getting on a plane or anything. But they're
but it is important to note that as good as England is and as deep as everything is, they can only bring 37 people like everybody else. So they're going to have to pick. And the downside of having such a deep, I mean, even more than a deep bench, I think England is at the point where they could side an A that would still beat a lot of teams. You are competing with your teammates. I guess I completely forgot about that because I don't know what it feels to feel like an English fan. But no, there is a lot of pressure, but it's all internal pressure. You're absolutely right. And it's interesting you brought up the Lions. It's far away, but there is now women's Lions. I am sure some of the older people are thinking about it.
I can well imagine. I mean, it's going to be a hell of a way to cap off, particularly for some of the older players. Cap
Imagine
off their
Skaz.
career. I became a Lion. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And who better to lead the Lions than somebody like Skaz? That would be amazing. It'd be brilliant.
It would be so aura. Like, yeah, it would be so.
Yeah,
it'd be so
absolutely.
Good.
I'll just finish the England chat. We've given them their praise. We don't do that too often on Irish Rugby Podcast.
It was very nice of us, I think.
It was very democratic.
We were very nice.
But
they better be nice to us on their podcast.
the only way of putting it, and we very much on this podcast like to take things just the straight and narrow. You've won 6 titles in a row. Is it going to be 7?
Yes.
That'll do. We can just move on to France then.
Move on.
anyway, Ireland plays France this weekend.
Yeah, they do, and that's
a
why
match I actually care about watching.
Well, it's at 1:00, so it's going to be a little bit of a pain for viewers not in our time zone. But this French team, they are a model of consistency. I knew this before reading into it, but then to see that they haven't finished outside the top 3 since 2009 really speaks.
I wouldn't
volumes.
say they're consistent at all lately.
Well, I'm going historically, but that's where I was going with this, because after the WXV showing, that's where the inconsistency kind of creeps in, and they've had was it 2 bad WXVs in a row? I can't remember how 2023 went for them, but what can we read into that? Like, is it a case of a team who probably arguably peaked maybe in 2022 and are just trying to get to 2025 World Cup potentially, Julia?
So this is the one that's frustrating for 2 reasons. One, France just in general, and it's the same. I know it's the same with the men. It's a tight-lipped union. They don't chat as much, I guess, in the media. And then the second thing I only learned when I really tried to start researching more closely, a lot of local French sport media has all gone behind paywalls. Makes it even harder, even if you don't read French, which a lot of us already have that hurdle. So it is a bit harder to get that information. Luckily, there are more people who are starting to podcast, who are starting to write about it, both in English and in French, which is helpful. But a lot of it kind of has to be like rumor, guessing, kind of deducing by what you do or don't see. And to be honest, and this is, again, rumor, because why would you confirm this if it's true? But I don't know necessarily if the 2-coach model is working. I'm not sure if the players love it. I'm not sure if there's a ton of faith in their senior leadership, not player leadership, but coaches, administrators, and especially you guys being Ireland fans, you know how messy that can end up, even if you have no interpersonal problems. So I do wonder about that. And I wonder about that because we see a few names missing that aren't injured and just aren't there. Gail Hermé is the number 1. And I know that she has had problems with one of the 2 coaches. And that is, again, gleaned from rumors and people chatting on social media. But because of that, and because of the other problems, luckily France is fixing their not being centralized problems, because Elite 1 is genuinely becoming a good competition. Most French players can stay in France, play high level in France. Awesome. We don't have that luxury in Wales. We don't have that luxury in Italy. Or Scotland. So, I do wonder if there is morale problems, if there are cohesion problems. We've been talking about cohesion. I'm looking at all of the clubs that people play at, and it looks like there are way more than 2 or 3, and that's good. It's good that there are a lot of elite clubs within Elite 1 that are competitive and that have national players on. But that said, I really wish they spoke more. I really wish we could understand more what the problems are, because otherwise you're left to do like what we're doing right now. And unfortunately, you could come to the conclusion that it's like maybe they just aren't that good. I don't think that's the case,
Yeah.
because they have so many individual giant stars.
Mm.
But that said, I don't know what else it could be.
You make an
I'm
interesting
curious
point.
what other rugby thinkers are thinking.
The point about the cohesion is quite interesting because
You're on mute.
I think can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I think the point about cohesion is quite interesting in that you never hear officially that there's issues with cohesion. You never hear officially that there's personality issues or that there's clashes. We look at the likes of, Munster at the end of last year, start of this year. There were lots and lots of rumors coming out. Nobody was really strongly denying it, and therefore you believe it. The Irish team was the same 2 years ago. There's lots of talk coming out of camp. They weren't saying anything officially, but you were hearing stories that were kind of, fizzling out through various sources that people were unhappy, that there was arguments, that there was, fraught kind of discussions going on, or there's just general tension. And I think when you start to hear rumors of that, it's actually probably got pretty bad by that point. So if you are hearing rumors about France, it's pretty bad at this point. But at the same time, I think the French, like Julia said, is they have some really big names. They've got some, they have the ability to just come together and pull out a performance. They're French. They do these things and they do it very, very well. They have a very adaptable style of play. I don't think we can write them off in any way. I don't think we're facing a weak French side as a strengthening Irish side. I don't think we're facing anything like that. I think it would still take an incredibly strong Irish side and a weak French side, but I don't think we're really seeing either of those just yet. Who knows on the day we could see that, but I think the French side is quite interesting to see, and I think, like you said, Julie, it's a really good point. You don't see a lot of information about them. It's almost like they're, and I know there is the language barrier, and I know stuff is paywalled, but I think a French style of managing a team is to keep it quite insular. There isn't a huge
Exactly.
amount of media. You don't see players being put in front of the media like you would with England, with Ireland, with Wales. You don't see players being offered up. It's a kind of they close their ranks, they play their rugby, and they keep it private. So it's very hard to really predict what kind of a French side you're going to have. In reality, what we could be facing is a poor form French side from 2024 getting stuff together and coming out of the traps and absolutely walking over us. It's impossible really to predict. I'd say that the French team is the most unpredictable of anybody.
I was gonna say it's interesting that I didn't actually expect you to say that. The rumblings across, all of our mutual friends and everything, and mine included, actually, I think there's absolutely a chance Ireland could beat France this time. Absolutely.
This is
I'm
what
hoping you're
good
right.
I think
this
it's
is what good podcasts do, because I
I
was
think
going to
it's
ask that
all I said is
question
that it's
and you just
possible,
went
but
there
I
anyway.
definitely pardon.
So no, look,
All I'm saying is that I think it's possible, but I absolutely think it's realistic.
yeah, look, I think every game, I think this is the thing. When you take England out of the equation, you could make a case for most teams in most games. Yes,
Yep.
home advantage and different things, and maybe there'll be injuries towards the back end of the tournament and everything. But you can definitely make a case for it. I think that's the bonus to the Women's Six Nations this year, especially in the World Cup year. But with France, look, you never know. You just never know. And it's so cliche to say about French rugby, but they do have that streak for a reason. They do have that title for a reason, and you hope that Ireland can turn them over this weekend. If they do, it would be a seismic result. We will talk about that more on the recap show and more in depth, but we do have to move on and to Wales, who I feel like in Ireland are a lot of people's second team, but only in women's rugby, never in the men's, never in the men's game. Julia, I'll start with yourself as a resident Welsh fan. Sean Lynn is now the man in charge. And look, to call a spade, he's going to have to do a lot of good work to stem the tide of the WRU rocking what was Welsh rugby's steadiest ship in women's rugby there for a hot minute, that is essentially, because they find a way to mess things up. But he's a man with a lot of pedigree, coming in from the club game. Could he do it?
Well, look, I will say, and just, you know, if Wales is your second team, then I do have good news for you. I do feel cautiously confident. Like we had said in the beginning, Sean Lynn is very well liked among the Welsh women, both the ones who played with him under Gloucester Hartpury and even the ones who haven't played with him. He is also, um, you know, he has said he's really excited to come home. He is the quintessential Welshman. You know, it isn't like this is some guy they found. This isn't Warren Gatland. This isn't some guy that we brought in because of his pedigree. This is a guy who wants this, who's from women's rugby, which are two big things that historically Wales has not focused on for their women's coach. Absolutely, WRU has looked at the women's head coach as a place to put your men who you think are on an upward trajectory, and they need to get experience.
Stepping stone.
And that's how you end up with someone like Jon Cunningham, who wasn't there for the right reasons. All that said, WRU has done two really good things. First, actually, was bringing in Belinda Moore, who seems like she's competent and she's actually there to try to make things better. And she's being communicative, and we're actually hearing about what's happening in the union, which was a big problem for a while. And it's how we got this bombshell about what was really happening. So all of that said, I think, much like Ireland of a year or two ago, I feel like the girls are coming in now and feeling like they have the wind at their backs in terms of just having somebody that they can trust isn't gonna, you know, for example, what we learned about what happened isn't gonna bully them. We found out that at the tail end of the WXV, they were getting bullied about their contracts. We didn't know that that was why they couldn't even pull it out, you know, against Italy. So all that said, I don't expect miracles. I don't expect that we're going to make third again. It was fantastic when we did. That's not going to be us this time. But I think that there will be comprehensive performances against the ones that we want to be performing against, which is Ireland and Scotland. I do think those are going to be really great games. I'm worried about Scotland being the first. I really wish we had anybody else first, but I think it's going to end up a really entertaining match. The lineup that was put out today is also one, I guess, if you want to be nice, you could say is experimental. Several people playing out of position, but I guess I have faith. Again, a lot of the people that he's playing a little bit out of position are players that he knows really well. They're players that play a lot together, which is the one good thing. I personally don't love that Gloucester Hartpury is just half Welsh. The other ones are kind of scattered among other club teams, but it is good for cohesion because that is something that Wales has historically lacked in the past few years. I think that could be one thing that we see improving. And Wales is very much like Ireland. It's a very Celtic nation thing that, like, when you feel like shit, you play like shit. And it's really nice that they might not feel like shit for once. And I think that's the kind of performance we're gonna see. That sounds more negative than it is, but there's a lot more into it, and we don't need to get into the weeds on that.
No,
I think you
that's
could be
Welsh
quite
rugby in a
hopeful.
nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you could really be quite hopeful. I think the team is going to be really buoyed by Sean Lynn coming in. I think, you know, like that, they're going to have shaken off the weight that had been
Exactly.
sitting on their shoulders for so long. What have they got to lose? Absolutely nothing. You know,
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because like Wooden Spoon last year, after consecutive third place finishes the 2 years prior, like, and I'm a little bit conscious of time, so I'll kind of roll two questions into one here. Do you expect them to bounce back? And can you kind of say that maybe last year was the blip, or maybe kind of like Ireland kind of had to go down to come back up? And as we said, Sean Lynn might be the perfect man. Like, do we expect him to bounce back under him? Well, that's for you. That's for
So,
you, Alva, first, and I'll let Julia come in afterwards.
no, please.
to be honest, I wouldn't be too concerned about whether they do bounce back or not. I would see the Six Nations as write off everything. You know, don't
Reset
look
button.
for results. Yeah, exactly. Reset button. See what you can do. You know, get confidence in the team, get cohesion in the team, start to get his system in place, start to develop under him a little bit. If it's bottom of the pile again, fine. You know, move on. But the only way is up, and you got the right man in there to find that upward trajectory. I wouldn't be concerned about position as a Welsh fan, I'd be looking for those things like cohesion. Are the players happy? Are they working together? Are they dropping their heads? Do they look like they don't want to be there? Though, it's an attitude change now. It's the start to grow, start of growing self-belief. Certainly as an Ireland fan, that's where we were 2 years ago, and we almost didn't even like seeing a little bit of success because it was thought, oh God, we're just going to get our hopes up, and it's the hope that kills you. But
That's
just
exactly
let them
where we're at right
play.
now.
Yeah, just let them play. Let them have fun. Let them enjoy playing rugby again. Let them enjoy building into a new system. See where it goes from there.
Julia, I'll let you jump in there from the Welsh perspective. Your thoughts on it all?
Oh no, that's exactly it. That was exactly what I was going to say anyway. Yes, sure. Performing in terms of wins would be great, but at this point, and when you are in a low place, and I know that you speak from experience, and that's why it sounded so accurate, is that yes, it's great if you can get a win, and of course we are looking for wins. I hate to keep piling on the poor guys, but you want to beat Italy. Um, that would be a great benchmark, but knowing Sean the way we do already, it's going to be, are you improving match over match? Are you feeling better? Do you feel supported? He, as a coach, is very much like we're a family guy. It seems to be working for this group of girls. It doesn't always work, but it works for these. So yeah, I would really like to see an improvement in performance rather than notching wins.
No, that I can I definitely understand that testament. It would be great to see Wales back competing properly, and we see a proper, mosh pit in that kind of second, third of the table. I don't say 16s, but you know what I mean, in around third, fourth, and a proper fight,
Third and
maybe
fourth
not to
and
the
fifth
death.
and sixth, I think, are the two biggest things people are fighting for.
Yeah, potentially, and we hope so. And one of the teams who will arguably be fighting for third as well is Scotland. We'll move on to them now because narrowly missed out on third last year. Nobody this side of the British Isles were complaining about that because it was Ireland who denied them with that last minute defeat in round five. Alva, start yourself. Like Wales, a lot of their players played England. I think for their first 23 tomorrow, I think it's only two players were involved in Celtic Challenge. Just for context, for any listeners who may not know. But saying all that, are they potentially on the precipice of a big year, do you think? Because they've taken fairly consistent strides, I think, compared to other teams.
Yeah, I think the Scottish team is quite interesting in that they're always there or thereabouts, but I think they ever so slightly underperform. But they could be up in third. They could be, really, really pushing for third every year, but they just don't quite come together as a side. And it's hard to know why. I think, have been a lot of issues within the union. There have been a lot of issues in terms of the domestic game for them, very similar to Ireland in that respect. So, I think the Scottish side is one that I think it's like a Celtic cohesion kind of thing. I would love to see Scotland doing really well. I'd love to see them pushing on. They have some really, really talented players in there, but I just don't know if they can really come together and barrel over teams that they need to. They're typically a smaller pack as well. They have some big guns, but they're not those fast-paced forwards. They're no Sarah Byrne. Christ, that woman coming at you with like the Jesus idiot. They don't have that kind of a player. We have that in Aoife Wafer. France have it in spades. England have it in spades as well.
Oh, I mean, Scotland does have Alex Stewart, but
they do, yeah.
take your point.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see where Scotland go. I'd love to see them really flourish at some point. It would be to our detriment if they do as an Irish side. So it's kind of it's hard to say that, but I think it's only good for the game to see Scotland really ramp it up. And they're always on the precipice of doing that, but they're just not quite there yet.
And Julia, to bring up that buzzword again, context, because Wales, Italy, and Ireland all have to travel to Edinburgh. It's the reverse of Ireland, who have three away games. Should we expect Scotland to kind of rise to it this year because of that and break into the top three for the first time in 20 years?
So I do think, and I am cognizant of what podcast I'm on, but I really do think that if there were a time for Scotland to make third, I do think it's this year. They also have a lot of wind in their sails. They also have a very, very encouraging motivator in their captain, Rachel Malcolm. I think they will want to perform for her. I think, and this is just conjecture, but I think there is a chance she might retire after the World Cup.
Yeah.
And
She's
if
done
that's
at
the case,
Loughborough.
well, interesting. We could talk off, but we'll talk off. So yeah, with that, I'm actually glad you brought up Loughborough because there is a lot of Scottish talent coming out of there as well. I think it is really, really, and I say this whenever we talk about Scotland, it's horrible what had to happen for Scotland to get better.
Yeah.
It should never ever happen to another union. I'm really glad that it's not what happened to Ireland or Wales to get a fire under their ass. It should never happen, but it did. It made the ball start rolling. And I think that Scotland has really stepped up now. I think out of the three Celtic nations, Scotland is taking building the domestic game apart from PWR the most seriously. They do have a really great championship that is accessible to people who are below PWR. And it's not mandated that they stay in Scotland, but if you're going to stay in Scotland anyway, it's nice to have a high competition. They're developing well. They also, I don't know what happened with Edinburgh at the Celtic Challenge, but we expected better, and it seemed like individual performances were better. There's a lot to hope for if you're a Scotland fan. I think this weekend is going to answer a lot of question marks that we have about performance and about their cohesion. We can talk about cohesion with every team except England.
Yeah.
I think this weekend is going to answer a lot of questions specifically about Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. But I'm really hoping for good things for Scotland because just like the other two, like they really deserve it and they've worked really hard for it and they went through something horrible for it.
Yeah, I think that Scotland team, they have some outstanding individuals.
They have some really great leadership.
Yeah,
really great heart.
Rachel Malcolm is just, an absolute legend in her own lifetime already.
I think she's one of the best captains women's rugby has ever seen.
And the best communicator with referees. I think, she's the type of player you'd follow to war, no questions asked.
Easily.
She's just one of those people. I think Evie Gallagher is on really, really good form at the moment.
I'm thrilled.
She's a fabulous player. I think Helen Nelson, some of the stats that I was seeing about her in the PWR, she's absolutely way up there. She's really on form. She's really performing. I think the Scottish side historically, though, have been, they've never been better than the sum of their parts. It's more of an individual. I think if they can get that to really work together, on paper, they have a phenomenal side.
I was going to say their 11 through 15 on paper for this weekend is frightening.
Is absolutely frightening. And, Rova Lloyd, Chloe Raleigh, you do not want to be
Lisa Thompson, Emma Orr is back fit, Fran McGee. It's Fran
McGee's a really good talent coming through as well. I think on paper, they are phenomenal. It's whether they can really get that to work together.
Absolutely.
Are they going to get it to work together? Do they have the right leadership there in terms of management? I don't know. I think we will see at this competition. I think, Julia, you say maybe this is their time. I think you're right. I think if not now, when?
Exactly. And they're very much a team that believes in if not now, when.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they are a team that would grasp it.
Yeah.
We have one more team to cover because it's not the Five Nations anymore. It is the six, and that team is Italy. Julia, I'll give you the closing remarks on them. If we don't know a lot about France, for instance, we definitely don't know a lot about Italy. What should we expect from them in this championship?
Yeah, look, Italy has a lot. So Italy has one very big pro right now. They have a new coach. We know that they have individual talent across both the forwards and the backs. Great. A lot of experience. There isn't a lot of inexperienced people coming up, which actually isn't great, but it's good for now. It's good for performance in matches. They have a coach who seems like he has a vision and that he's coming in for the right reasons. He doesn't have any experience in women's. We'll see how that goes. The big problem with Italy is that of all of the nations in Six Nations, their players play together the least.
Yeah.
Their contracts are the worst, and we're talking about some pretty shitty contracts across all of our teams. Their contracts are the worst. Most of them do not play in Italy. They play in Spain, they play in France, they play in the PWR. Some even go to Australia and New Zealand. There isn't a lot of time to play together. And when you aren't running high performance centers, 3 or 4 months out of the year or whatever, which is what you really want minimum for playing together to have any kind of cohesion, yeah, you're going to feel like you're hitting reset every time you get back to camp. And I think that that's the problem that they face. Even more
It's
so than
disjointed.
yeah, there's a lot of exactly. There's a lot of disjoint. I don't know, for example, how they feel about leadership. Elisa Giordano has been the captain for the past 2 or 3 years, but it's been bouncing around from name to name. I do wonder what morale is like. But that said, they really love their rugby, and I think that it's a testament to the girls that they all uproot their lives. A lot of them have to bounce from team to team. It's great that they've found a small enclave at Sale Sharks. That's great. But there are a lot of them that are still bouncing from country to country to country half of the year. It's hard to be successful.
It absolutely is. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That disjointed nature, that lack of being able to come together and really get to know how each other plays is what really holds them back. I think, again, similar to Scotland, in some ways, they have some fabulous individual players.
Exactly.
We cannot, have a podcast and not mention Rigoni. She is just
Rigoni, of course.
She is just stellar. She's just the most creative player, I think, out of all of the teams. She plays with the
incredible news. Her center partner, Michaela Solari, is finally back from injury, which is also going to be huge. I think
and that's amazing. And they work quite well together, I think.
Exactly.
I think they both
really
have a little
pair.
bit of flair. I think, if anybody who's a fan of the men's game and doesn't know much about the women's game, if I was to sum up who Rigoni is, I'd be saying that she's like Finn Russell, only likable. That she plays
absolutely.
It can be hard to like. Yeah. The cheeky chappy. She's just lovable in that, like that she plays with abandon. She plays to her own tune, and the rest of them just play with her. She does what she wants. She is deeply unpredictable as a player, but plays with a lot of quality in that.
I was going to say, as the kids say, she's got the riz. She's got rugby riz.
She does. She absolutely does. And she enjoys what she does.
Exactly.
And I think
she loves being there.
She does. And I think, like Finn Russell, in some ways, he was criticized definitely a few seasons ago, particularly by his own fans, of smiling when he made a mistake. And they thought,
God forbid they have fun at their jobs.
Exactly. I think the smile was like, oh Christ, why did I try that? Damn it, kind of thing.
People.
And she does the same thing. She just kind of, if she tries something and it doesn't quite pull off, as long as it doesn't throw the game into complete jeopardy, she's like, to try like that. Maybe I'll do it again.
That's very Italian too, which is really refreshing.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, to add to that, Dinka as well is just a fabulous player. And again, she's kind of given a lot of freedom to kind of do what she wants. She's wicked with the ball in hand. She has a fabulous step. She's stepped you 6 times in a phone box, and you won't even know about it until she's exited. She's a fabulous player. So I think, again, if they can find that cohesion, they would be great. I think they're far less likely to find that cohesion than Scotland.
It's teed up to be a fascinating championship over the next 6 weeks. Arguably a better format, the fact that there's not 2 rest weeks in the middle of the 6 nations. Look, that's something we can discuss again next year, but it's just something that I prefer, especially when I'm going to be in France on the rest week, so I don't need to worry about juggling multiple podcasts. But we will leave it at that. My thanks to Ailbhe and to Julia for a really enjoyable preview show. Lots to inform us on, lots to get excited upon. Ireland kick off the championship at 1 o'clock up in Belfast against France. That's live on Virgin Media 1. So make sure to tune into that. We will be back on Sunday to recap the game. But as always, if you like what you see here and want to subscribe for wholesale rugby coverage for the remainder of this season, probably into the summer, probably into the autumn, and probably back into the wraparound into next season as well. Subscribe on all good platforms. You can find links for all my channels below. But for now, and until we are back with the round one recap show, take it easy. Thank you very much.